pass it over to our friends John Bartel and Evan Georges.
First thing, we're talking about branding, and as you could see, I've made a little bit of a touch up on our instance here to showcase some things. And you may have realized as an admin, we've recently updated our login experience, and this is one experience that we are very proud of introducing because this is a real big stepping stone for us getting into our new architecture and, of course, building out and refreshing some of the things that perhaps have been aging a bit. So this is a really good segue to talk about branding. So let's go jump in and get started. Oh, let me put in the correct password and let's jump in. Kind of going back to the key point about branding, I always want to bring that up. It seems simple, it sounds simple, but if I'm onboarding somebody that's new to ShareFile, I think that's one of the key things to jump in right away. Again, that just really puts the feel and the customization of your organization and gives your clients a bit of comfort when they are interacting with you and collaborating within ShareFile, that they know, of course, you're legitimate, obviously, and they know it's a tool that obviously you took time to customize. So as always, we just want to jump into our admin settings on the left, and under company account info, we have the edit company branding. So within here, a couple key things let's touch on. First off, your account name. Account name is basically what it's actually going to show within the browser tab here. It does also present itself in certain, say, notifications and links and everything else that kind of comes from ShareFile. So your account name wants to be very particular. Obviously, ShareFile rocks. We all know that. So we just titled that here. But that's one key thing. Just be sure that your account name is proper and correct. The first thing you're going to notice is a basic options. Couple things as usual, like the page title. You can upload your logo that's actually going to present up here on the left-hand side if you didn't want ShareFile in there. But then the basic options we have here is your header background and your accent color. So you'll see your header information or your color here, and then the accent color you'll see kind of throughout ShareFile pop up with certain text and information. That's the basics. If you wanted to just to get that started, great. It's very simple to get going. The great thing also here is that you can basically put in a color code. So if you have within your organization a certain color code that you need to match particularly, you can just actually paste that into that field so it'll match directly. So you don't have to sit there and pick and choose the color itself. But let's get into more of the advanced options. The more advanced options that I'm talking about is, first off, again, we see the same thing, the page title, the favicon that you would see up at the top left, the header information, which I kind of went over. You do also have a background image that you can set up there as well, aside from just the color. Again, a little bit more uniqueness if you wanted to. You also have on the page itself, you could differentiate the accent color if you wanted to. But I think the most important thing is your login page. As I showed you, I customized my login page just to help give me a nice feeling of ShareFile and obviously within the organization, help promote that. So that's something you definitely want to take some time in orchestrating here and making this unique again to your organization itself. Big thing there is your background image, showcase who you are, could be your company logo, or just something to kind of showcase or remind clients you are who you are. Big key topic here, though, that I think I spend a lot more time on when we're talking about branding is email options. Obviously, with any kind of collaboration tool or SaaS product, notifications are always huge, right? So certainly making sure that you have your logo within a notification, and also being able to bring in some header text and some footer text. I think these are awesome areas to actually put in if you had a EULA, a short EULA, or a small, say, short kind of blurb for terms and conditions. That's always nice to put here. But anything to just to help exercise either awareness or security based on your organization, I think it's always key there, again, to present that. So when a client or an employee gets a notification, again, you can be rest assured that that customization will present itself to them and they don't think it's obviously something malicious. Going down the path here, we also have customization when it comes to subdomains. I get asked this a lot of times, It could be that, say, for instance, you do a lot of mergers and acquisitions, or perhaps your organization is being bought up by somebody else that does want to continue using ShareFile. The big thing here is you can always change up your subdomain to say either the new company, or if you want to abbreviate your name, if you have a long name, typically, of course, say legal companies, legal institutions typically have very long names. You can help abbreviate that within these subdomains. One key thing, I also get this a lot in more of the administrative sessions I have in talking about configurations, is just be careful of taking out a subdomain. For instance, ShareFile rocks. I had this for a long time. I send a lot of shares and send a lot of request links out. The big thing there is that I'm logging into ShareFile rocks. So when I'm actually creating those shares, it's always going to come back to that ShareFile rocks domain. So if one day I come in here and say, I don't want ShareFile rocks, I delete that out and put something else in, be aware that those share links will void out because, of course, there's no way for us to be able to tell that that link belongs to the subdomain because that's how we know uniquely how to get back to the instance when, say, a client is clicking on a share link or a request link. So that's very key. Just a little, thing there. Again, when you're either changing a company name or you're getting acquired or you're acquiring a company and you're changing that name all around, just be cautious of that. What you can do is put that ShareFile rocks down on the third one and put maybe your main one as, say, the new name of your company, or if you're transitioning into something else. I think that's just very key. Again, when we're talking about that, gets brought up quite a lot when it comes to it. All right, so let's move on. Again, just to reiterate, branding, I think, is a very good first step for any administrator to come into your new ShareFile instance. Come in here, make it your own, make it feel comfortable, so you get that little bit of security right off the bat. So let's talk about a bit of some of the security settings. I want to touch on some of the new things. Certainly people that have been with us here in ShareFile probably know most of our administrative settings or just aware of them, but let's talk a bit of the new ones. Right off the bat, you might have got a notification recently that now you, as a regular administrator, you don't have to actually be an actual account owner to do this. But now, as somebody that can manage employees, and we will talk a little bit about user permissions later in the webinar. But now, if you have the manage employee option, you can now come in and reset your two-factor verification for employees. Again, this only used to be doable through the account owner only. And if you know how ShareFile kind of runs, the account owner is basically the top dog. They're the ones that can pretty much do everything within the instance, and they have some unique capabilities that no other administrator can have. And one thing we wanted to bring out to other administrators, because we've heard from you, the voice of the customer, is to be allowed to reset somebody's two-factor or 2FA, because obviously if the account owner is on vacation or they're not in it all the time, it is a little bit of annoyance. So we wanted to bring that to, again, more of the administrators that have the ability to manage employees. So just right off the bat, wanted to showcase that. You should now be able to see the reset two-step verification, and that will send a notification over to here, our friend Embry, to have them reset their two-factor the next time they sign in. Let's go over some of the automation and alertness that we are getting to. I kind of mentioned in the beginning because I saw a lot of us are application managers or IT managers in general, kind of going through and managing ShareFile, but you're not always in ShareFile. Sometimes you think of this as a kind of set it, forget it, which you can, but it's always kind of good to keep up on the security aspects of ShareFile. You are dealing with data after all. So let's go through some of the key points here in terms of being aware. So first off, security alerts. Let's talk a little bit about that. This is nothing too new, but this is something, again, we're always trying to exercise, is for you being an administrator, being aware, but not just you as an administrator, but also your employees and clients. So we have different alerts based on things like suspicious file being uploaded to a folder. That happens sometimes where we do scan, of course, every file that's coming in the share file. And of course, it could be something malicious. You as an administrator can be notified of this. So you can gauge your alerts based on your needs. You may be saying, hey, I don't want any of my employees and clients to be getting any of this activity alerts just as administrator. So you have that uniqueness to build out some of those notifications to be sure that the right people are getting aware of that. Another thing here is you can add alternate contacts. So a big thing was not just administrators, but other people can also receive these. Could be just somebody as a regular employee that might need these. So you can also add users and other distribution groups in here to receive those alerts as well. I believe also we had a quarantine file come in. Evan was nice enough to actually upload an infected file to our instance at the same time. So the great thing about that was we actually got that notification. So actually, let me bring that email over here because I think it's great awareness as we talk about this. That as you could see, Evan went and uploaded something malicious, and I was right away detected that I'm sorry, sent an email that there was something detected in that file and to actually take a look. So if I actually click that, it will take me to the quarantine files where I can actually check those, download them, or maybe it could be something that you know is obviously just a false positive. You can restore them, but perform better, of course, investigation once you actually get that notification. So let's also skip over to some of the actual auto remediation that we have. Outside of just security alerts, we also have auto remediation based on these different scenarios. These are things like impossible travel. If we're seeing a user log in from several different countries in a short span of time, we can auto lock out that user and provide other ways of negating their access to ShareFile. But as you can see, like a high download activity and also access from a high number of different IPs are just some of the scenarios we're coming out with. We are extenuating this as we speak. We're continually adding new scenarios. So again, this way, as again, administrator that might not be in here all the time, this is really key to have these on so you're aware if there was something suspicious going on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about just the login security. Since we're actually in here, I do want to go across a couple things here, a couple key things. First off, you do have your lockout configuration. That's always nice to have. Be sure that you're configuring it based on other SaaS products that you have within your company, based on too many login attempts or how long that person will be locked out after that attempt. I would highly suggest that you do, of course, align that with, again, your organization's and how your other SaaS products are set up. We do have terms and conditions and also IP restrictions. The terms and conditions, as you can see, is something support would have to set up with you or reach out to your customer success engineer like myself or Evan to help set that up on the back end. But that's great for being able to present that once, again, you have somebody log in, it'll get presented to them. Hopefully that will come more towards the front for you to configure. For now, it's something on the back end. Same thing as IP restrictions. We do have ways to block, say a certain amount of IP addresses that you want to be allowed or disallowed from employers or clients. We also can set that up on the back end. Again, contact support or your CSC to help set that up, because I think that's very vital. If there is a notion where you only want your employees to access ShareFile once you're within your network or your corporate network, we could set that up so it does help restrict that. And then finally, you do have a couple things here with authentication. The top one here is your log off inactive users. This is strictly for your web browsing session. So after that 16 hours, it will log that person out of that session. Again, I would match it up to other SaaS products that you have already established within your organization to match inactivity sessions and be sure that matches. And then we do have the reauthenticate. This is actually for your different applications that we have. So we do have a desktop app, we do have an Outlook plugin, and other ones that do integrate with ShareFile. This pertains to that session. So if you did want to set it so that's a better user experience, so it never logs them out, you can set that to never, which is by default. Or if it require them to relog in after a certain amount of days, you can set that based on a set time, as you can see here from the dropdown. And then finally, obviously, single sign-on is always important. You want to be sure that you're kind of having that fluid motion with your other products. You can set up SAML. We do offer SAML 2.0. It doesn't necessarily say here, but we should support 3.0 as well. But very simple setup, exclusive, easy way of actually getting that going so that your employees can help authenticate through your SAML provider. And then finally, just want to mention one big thing here is your require SSO login. I think this is always something that is just kind of skipped over, but you can require your employees to be sure that they're using single sign-on if I have this enabled. As ShareFile goes, you do have an account that's created within it. So they are able to log in directly through their account that they've created. But traditionally, you usually teach them that they're going to go through your company account login to actually do it. But this is just one way to assure that they are going through the actual SAML provider that, of course, you integrated with ShareFile. All right, before I hand it over to Evan, and I think this is a good segue over to Evan's part, is let's talk about retention. Retention is always big. We always talk about data living forever somewhere, data sprawl overall. As we continue into the future, as we kind of build out your data repositories, they continue to grow. And obviously, you might not want ShareFile to be, say, that data dumping ground, if you will. Retention is always key with us. We want to be sure that you have those options. So I'm going to just show you a couple things right off the bat. And again, I think Evan's going to expand a little bit more on this one his time. But if you go under the advanced preferences, under file settings, the first thing you're going to see down below here is your default retention policy. Now, by default, it is set to never. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to scramble to say, oh my gosh, did I set this already? But this is something you should review. I can set this based on a custom amount of days if I wanted to, or pre-selected as you can see here. But if I say I want data to only exist after a day and I save this, be aware that this isn't retroactive. So this doesn't mean it's going to wipe everything out that's been on your ShareFile instance past a day. This will only affect new files and data that are uploaded to ShareFile after I save this. So this is your global setting. So this is an umbrella, right? Is a catch-all, if you will, for anything that is uploaded to your instance. It doesn't matter where it goes, it's going to adhere to your default policy. But then you might say, John, I don't want that. I have particular projects that might need to go over a day, or maybe I just don't want to set a default and go based on something particular. Say if I have a folder and I want that folder only to last for so long, we do have per folder retention. So when we come into a folder, say this is a customer, it's long-standing. Obviously this might be something where I'm working on some sensitive data and they don't want that data to live within our ShareFile instance for so long. Or they might say this can only exist for, say, 30 days once it's uploaded to a folder. You might need to abide by a client's information request in terms of how they keep data with, of course, third parties. So as an owner, or if you're an administrator of a folder, you can come up at the top here and come down to edit advanced folder settings. And the top two options here, you do have the folder expiration date, which you could set a particular date for this to basically implode with all the data in it, or you could set a amount of days that it holds within the folder itself. So if I actually did make this say 10 days, it will retroactively say within the folder, things cannot last past 10 days. So things that have been in here past 10 days, you will see a little warning sign next to that actual data. We do give you a buffer of time up to 7 days to allow you to look at that data, retrieve it, or if maybe you made a mistake within your retention policy, you can come back and reset that if you will. But we do want to give you a buffer. So if I do set this 10 days, not all your data just going to disappear based on that setting itself. So just want you to be aware of that. So I do feel that's very important. I think one big key takeaway here is when we talk about retention, I have a lot of discussions with admins when it comes to retention, how to set it properly, what ways or strategies should we actually achieve this? There could be times where you have a policy change within your company where you now need to set everything to 30 days And that's including data that's already existing in ShareFile. I highly stress to reach out to your customer success engineer because we could help you kind of go through those plans and assure those plans do succeed within ShareFile and be sure any of that existing data does adhere to file retention. We do have other ways we can recommend, like different means of our API to help, say, put that retention on all files across the board in one big swoop. So we do have other means and other suggestions that we can suggest outside of course, what I'm just showing you here today. So definitely, again, stress to reach out to us if there's, say, a retention talk that you need to have. All right, Evan, I think that's a really good segue coming into your part. I think you're going to talk a little bit about reporting and storage usage. So that kind of goes hand in hand with retention. So I'm going to stop sharing and allow you to jump in.
Perfect. Yeah, I believe I took over now.
Yep, you did.
Perfect. Yeah, so good segue. Obviously, file retention, folder retention, that's a big topic that gets discussed quite often with admins. There is a lot of different strategy and different use cases that you guys are using the product anyhow. So, looking at ways to monitor the usage of ShareFile, there have been some ways in the past through reporting, just giving some of that metadata, that data around the activity that ShareFile is collecting. So we'll look into some of the reporting capabilities, but also some of the new features that we have around monitoring things like storage. So I got my admin console up right now, going into storage and storage usage for the account. This isn't just tracked by the volume of active files. Now, this is obviously a bad example because it's just a demo account that we have. But as admins, if you have this ability to go check on storage, this also includes things like versions, file versions, so different use cases of ShareFile if you guys are doing any sort of Office co-editing, if you have that sort of licensing and capability, or just any sort of collaboration efforts where people are uploading different versions of files and needing to backtrack, that's something also to take into consideration. And files that have even been, potentially not purged from the system. So what is file that's deleted versus files that are here? So here's where you can see basically just general storage consumption. Again, a couple features, as if you're walking through this next to me, some of you admins may not have some of these settings. So that'll go and determine, some of the user access policies that we can look at later. But right now, it's really just monitoring with our ShareFile managed license. It's more of a soft cap, but being able to allocate a terabyte of storage for each user. How's everyone tracking towards that goal? There are some other options where you can actually lock this down a little bit deeper for users and their settings. And so this is actually something that we have on this account. Again, it's with specific license tiers, but we have a feature which is called storage quota. So this will actually allow you to allocate specific storage. So let's say that you have a lot of users where it's more just quick transactional type data exchange, and you don't want to open the door to some of the personal drive, personal folder type features, that there are some stricter abilities that some admins have where they can set quota on the entire account as a soft cap for each user, or also to be able to prohibit users from that in the future. So it is something to take into consideration, something to think about. And it all goes in, again, towards what you guys are trying to accomplish, what the purpose of ShareFile is. So going into retention, going into understanding the use, the life cycle of a client versus, a licensed user and what they're doing in the account. Another way to determine this type of information is going to be through reporting. So we're already in advanced preferences, file settings. We've already looked at storage and storage usage. The storage usage dashboard is really just taking reported data. And this is really ShareFile's first effort of providing more visualizations, let's say, with data. So you can imagine in the future that there will be some other capabilities based on the data that we're able to provide to you as far as how you can connect and work with it. But for now, what we're able to offer is within ShareFile reporting here. This is allowing you to generate detailed reports, so file activity, user access, storage, And as an admin, depending on your role or what your visibility is that you need to have, this is something that you can also potentially export and look to import into another system, as we provide these reports as CSVs or Excels. So pretty easy to come in here and create a report for the account, and pretty explanatory as you're going through the process. Typical reports that we'll see admins creating for the most part will probably be the usage report here at the top. We've ran one of these in the past, but this will actually provide you very robust detail on the account. And for us, it'll be pretty quick to run. As you can see, there is some custom date ranges. Some people like to have these as recurring reports. So being able to set that up as a recurring report, have it pulling data for today, every day for the entire account. You can see some specific data points around failed logins. There are some other features that you don't need to concern yourself with unless you're using our customer managed storage zone, things like DLP here. But being able to understand the specific activities and who the users are, and then understanding, what is the access, what sort of storage bandwidth do we have going through the account, who are the actual employee or client users that we have, because there are a lot of different ways even that client users can make their way into your system. So that's something else that you guys can take into consideration is, the users report will be a very beneficial one to understand current state. We don't have any sort of automated feature within ShareFile that will just purge licenses after a certain amount of day of inactivity. So you do need to be a little more proactive when it comes to user management. Obviously, user control, you can set things like defaults of requiring login. There's ways that you can go through and backpedal to secure yourself. But the deletion, the determination of what makes these people a client is something that you guys have to think about with your end users. But these reports will provide you valuable information to allow you to understand how you want to make decisions of what is ShareFile's footprint within our organization moving forward. How do we want to monitor this, or how do we track something where there might be some issues? So if you haven't gotten yourself into reporting, if you have this ability, definitely go around and pull some reports. Next thing that we have is the preferences. So we're going to talk about some security preferences, or just preferences that you have around files, email, messaging, and then we'll get more into the user management side, which is going to be a big portion. But from the advanced preferences section, this is where a lot of the tweaks to the back end of ShareFile will lie. So jumping in, we don't need to talk too much about the AI settings right now. Now, if you are on our premium license, we do have what is projects and document request lists. So if you're frequently requesting documents from clients, that we do have some AI incorporated into our product that can auto-generate, a provided by client type list. It's using, Gen AI. This is something that, again, our premium license will have, as well as the secure share recommender. So John showed a little bit earlier when we were within the file settings, within the login security settings, where you're able to have some of these. This is not to be confused with AI. This is more just giving you a heads up. But if you align with file settings that we'll look at, you'll see that there's some defaults that you can set for the account for what, if someone's doing a share, what that will be. And so going back into this setting, a share recommender, again, this is something that comes with the premium feature, will be able to scan a content of a document, be able to understand, hey, this contains some sort of PII. Let's alert the sharer that they're not sending this document in a way that we've deemed the most secure. So I don't want to harp too much on this, but if you do have these features and it is something you're interested in looking into, that's why this is here. Email settings, pretty easy. We have the alerts, the notifications that are coming from ShareFile. You got to understand when you're using our product, it's a SaaS application. So understanding your clients that you're working with, what sort of activity, what sort of things are being blocked by their own servers. We don't have that type of control. So we do have our emails coming from ShareFile. Now you can connect to your own SMTP if you guys so choose to have the notifications coming from your own side. And that's something that we do give our admins the ability to configure, which is great. The other ones are pretty straightforward. Client shares, no one's doing this. Folder access list, this is, hey, you guys have end users that are using the folder subfolder structure in ShareFile. When I'm clicking around in there, I can see the files, but I can also see the people that are in that folder. Now, if I'm not an admin of that folder, maybe I want to hide that. You know, maybe there's a case where I'm adding a bunch of people to that folder, but I don't need them necessarily to see who else has access to the content in there. So I do have the ability to disable that. This is a global setting. So moving into file settings, this one is pretty straightforward. So in the past, ShareFile used to default everything sent as what we consider anonymous. This anyone public must enter a name. I go into ShareFile, I want to share a resource, or I want to request a resource. That's really the activity that we're providing. We're generating links for that. And here's where you provide the settings or the controls that can be the default for your account. So in this case, we've chosen that we want to give all of our licensed users the ability when they are doing a share or a request to have these options to choose from. So anonymous is just a link. I click it, nothing. You know, anyone public must enter name. This is great. It's still an anonymous login because I can enter any sort of text in there, but I have to enter something. And that will create a client user, but it will not give them an associated email. It won't have an associated login because the way that this client was created is in a way that it wasn't a requirement for them to log in. Versus a more strict approach for clients and employees to have to sign in. So if I wanted to take a more strict approach on our account and not offer any sort of anonymous activity, I could choose to uncheck these and save these boxes. And no longer will anyone in my account have the ability to share or request things anonymously. So obviously make these changes at your own grace, understand who your end users are and the overhead or impact that will take. But also you can take a less strict approach and enable these, but also set default permissions for if I'm just someone who's creating a share and not even looking at the settings itself, that this is always what it's just going to default to. And the same thing goes with retention. You know, we want to make sure we know how long our data goes out there with shares or requests. Think of this as things that are outside of the folder structure, more of that ad hoc activity that your end users might be doing. And so you can control those settings here. Pretty straightforward stuff. John already talked about the default retention policy. You know, versioning, that was that one that I did talk about. So being able to say, hey, if we have people that are using Office editing or people who we know are uploading multiple versions of files and collaborating internally with their colleagues or with their, you know, with their clients, that we do have this feature that you can turn on. When it's turned on, it is set to unlimited. So keep in mind that each version of a file counts as you know, a file that's saved in storage. So you can set some hard-coded limits here, or we have some preset options here. Typically, we'll see about 5 or 10, but I have worked through some issues or challenges where customers, you know, might have had to set it a little bit higher. So definitely something to keep in mind based on who your end users are and what they're using. Another important feature here. So the tools, we're looking through the web application, but ShareFile does offer other client apps, other ways of connecting in to integrate with our services. You know, we're basically just an API and storage as two different components that we're providing. So you can connect into ShareFile using a virtual drive on your desktop as ShareFile for Windows or ShareFile for Mac. You know, we have a plugin for Outlook or for Gmail. We even have some more on the you know, older side or legacy side where we have FTPS. We do not support SFTP, server to server, but we do act as a client in this sense, and we can have FTPS enabled for accounts. And then there are some other avenues that you can connect into ShareFile, things like the API. And so you might have users who need to connect into ShareFile other ways. Maybe I don't need to come in and open a web browser every time. Maybe I'm working out of an existing application and I want to hit file save, and I want to have a drive location to which I can set that up. You know, so ShareFile tools are a great way that you can understand what options or what tools are going to be available for your end users to use. You can also configure. So if you do have people that are leveraging the Outlook plugin, this has been a real like bread and butter ShareFile top level feature for, you know, a very long time. As you can imagine, dragging and dropping, not wanting to bog down Exchange servers. You can configure some backend settings specific to the Outlook plugin here for the account as well around, hey, let's convert this file to be sent through ShareFile versus Exchange versus Outlook. Obviously, the person needs to have an account. There's a plugin that gets logged in, but you can also configure those settings here as well. So pretty good stuff there. As far as that's concerned, I think that's all we need to talk about from an advanced preferences. I did skim over a few other options that we can touch on if there are any follow-up questions. You guys might notice this section here called policies. Some of you may not have this in your account. I will note that there is, as a part of the user management strategy with ShareFile, it really depends on how many users you have, how you plan to onboard your users. For a lot of you, you might be coming into the web application and provisioning people from the people section. You do have the option to create employees manually, but in the event of wanting to push this into a more automated manner, that we do have a user management tool. And so when I go back to this feature called policy, this is aligning where, hey, I want to provision users in bulk to ShareFile, but maybe I also want to align the user access policies for said users, or create specific groups that might align to OUs that you have, file and folder. So you guys can see it is pretty straightforward. Again, reach out to your CSE, reach out to your account team to see if this is a feature that you guys can enable. I only advise looking at this if you are provisioning people in bulk, but there is a lot that you can get away with in the application itself. So right now, you do have the ability to manage users. We talked about one of the great benefits is for anyone that can manage employees, they can now reset two-factor for your users. So I can come in here, I can update user permissions if this decides to load. But back to user management tool, if you guys are not using that, it is something that you can look up through the help or within the ShareFile documents. And it's anyone who's on a domain joined machine and is using Windows Active Directory. Keep in mind, that's a little backdating yourself. We are working on a means of being able to integrate with cloud IDPs. So look into 2025 for that. But in right now, the current iteration is Windows AD. And actually being able to have a tool that you can run to provision users and groups into your ShareFile account. So pretty great stuff there. But in the case of what we're looking at right now, a lot of you guys are just familiar with being able to select an individual user and manage them individually. Either way, you're accomplishing the same task. It gives you the ability to update what their permissions are. As you guys might notice, there isn't some set role called admin in here. Understanding that distinction between admin permissions and regular employee permissions. As admins, you guys have to understand you might not be the account owner, but you might be an admin where you can provision and create users. So what I was saying was, regular employees versus who is an admin employee. I think you guys have to determine what by going and looking through some of these user access permissions. So there are specific abilities like being able to run reports, being able to create or edit storage zones, being able to run or edit billing, being able to create root level folders. These are all types of permissions that you can grant to people. And so determining what an admin is in ShareFile, you have to consider folder level versus application. What are they running? What sort of data are they gathering? And so take a good approach in understanding what those features are, what the defaults are, and keep in mind as you're provisioning your users to determine that you're probably not giving a lot of your basic end users the ability to create root level folders. That's always something that you want to have turned off. But otherwise, that will do it from a user management standpoint. I wanted to touch a little bit on the resources side, but since I'm having a little latency, I don't know if I wanted to pass that to you. I figured we can go through, just some of how to get help within the product.
If you're an administrator, down on the bottom right, you will see your customer success outreach there if you're an administrator. You should see that on your web interface. If you click on the resource option here, there should be a tab for your customer success engineer. Great thing about that is you can just input a question that you have. It'll get sent directly to your dedicated CSE, and then that will get us alerted and we'll reach out to you. You might already have a working relationship with your CSE. So definitely, from that part, getting them involved in any of these kind of discussions where it's going through, just like what Evan was showing, your different security options, user management, getting ideas of that. I think, as a CSE, that's really essential for us to kind of get involved because we just want to make sure that, again, you're comfortable with your instance and it's set right for how you want your organization to work with your employees and clients.